community. So let's dig in. Well, first, of course, we're thrilled to have you here. This is his first Raizado Festival. How many of you are here for the first time? A lot of people for the first time. All
Wow, bravo.
right. All right. Welcome. How many are here? How many of you here are OGs, have been here all 5 years? All
So,
right. All right.
Hector.
Well, thank you all for being here. And so, Leopoldo, it's your first year here. We're thrilled to have you. And I think something that's really unique about you and your artistry is that you do work across film, literature, visual arts, and storytelling. Why are all these mediums important to you?
First of all, it's such an honor to be here, to be with this wonderful human being that it's kind of my hero since the letter she wrote a few years ago. And I've been following you, Monica, and everything that you do, everything you touch, all the people that you have connected, just makes me feel more and more proud of being, a Mexican immigrant. And in my adventures, I just want to tell you how lucky I am to be your friend. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm lucky to be your friend. Thank you.
It's I love this question because people keep asking me like why so many things, and I don't see them as at all as since I'm like I love to tell this story. My mom passed away and she left kind of like weird gifts to all of us that she hid in different houses. So every year we discover a new one. And the first package that I received, I opened it, and it was just my grades from like kindergarten to like first grade. And it was, I'm 100 years old, so they were all handwritten. They hadn't invented the computer yet or whatever. And what was incredible was that in all the grades there was like this same message. It was like Leopoldo is kind of fun and intelligent, but all he cares is about is writing his little stories and making his little doodles. And I was reading this thing, and in grades back then, your mom had to sign it, and it was her signature, like really big, Andrea Valeria. And she was telling me from the beyond. She was saying, "So this is you." And I was in my studio writing and painting, and I was like looking at that, and I loved it so much. And if you guys want to see this letter, I posted on my IMDb. I use IMDb, which is kind of like a professional thing that's ridiculous. So I post weird things about me, kind of my little rebellious anti-Hollywood thing to do. And I love the signature of my mom because she's saying like, "That's who you are." So I've always been interested in telling stories. And I've said in a few different conversations that when you're an artist, you're a little bit like a radio, and the idea is that you dial on different frequencies, and every artist can catch their own frequency. And sometimes a frequency work, and then you have to jump into another one. But being Mexican, you kind of have that feel that you have a lot of frequencies to talk to. And I've always reacted to opportunities. So sometimes books start as a drawing and end up in a book. Other times I'm making a movie and it ends up in a painting. So it's always been like a process of reacting to circumstance and opportunity, and just hunger to create.
So amazing. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about your creative process. Can you walk us through that a bit? I know you've said you sort of maybe start in one medium and move to another, but what does that actually look like?
That's a fun question, and I love to answer it. There's a couple of people here that've been to my studio, so they know it's a little bit of a mad laboratory. And I have a studio in New York, and I also have studios in Mexico and in Oaxaca. And to me, I am a reactive artist. I've never kind of chased just an idea. Ideas come to me in so many different ways. I'm very curious. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly walking. I'm constantly trying to see the world and to, like a sponge, absorb it. And I react to the things that present to me. And so, for example, even in my painting, I kind of use like memories and muscle memory to react to things. And in my writing, it's a very similar kind of language. but the weird part of it is that when I was a kid, I was very dyslexic, and I think I'm still are. Like if you scream at me, where's the right and where's the left? I need to see where my watch is to really know, and so everything I've done, it's kind of resisted me, and it's always been like a big issue for me to. As a kid, I was like out of my mind. I was trying to find paths to respond to an idea or a feeling that came to me. So all the work, all my process is to absorb an idea, a feeling, a people, a memory, and then connect to that path and respond to it in a way that I feel that is honest to that journey. I'll give you a very quick example. One of the things that I use the most is my scent. I have almost like I call it like a photographic scent memory, and I can't remember a number or anything digital, but I have very clear memories of like a specific dress of a friend of mine in second grade, a teacher's car, the plastic of a friend's sofa. Their parents used to like put plastic on. So and I use that in all of my languages, in all of the frequencies, as I call them, like when I'm writing or when I'm making a movie or when I'm making a painting, I use that frequency of scent that triggers me to respond to that. So it's kind of like a loop.
Okay. Wow. All right. So for another piece of your work has been really focused on Latine history, and in particular celebrating indigenous roots. And you've done a lot of work around colonialism, facing colonialism, and the legacy of colonialism. How do you raise those issues through your work? They're very complex issues. So how are you bringing those through your art?
Being Mexican and being from a European part of Mexico brings you a lot of like complex, contradictory feelings. When I was way in my early 20s, I discovered in my father's family's ancestry, that they had indigenous bloods. And it was after my dad passed away that I started to kind of dig in of his family. And in Mexico, some people kind of hit that. It was crazy because I felt kind of like connected to something I thought it didn't exist. But it really started way before. When I was like 2 or 3 years old, my mother was like Erin Brockovich. She would take, like she had 4 kids, she had like 3 jobs, and she would carry us all around the world, all around Mexico. That was my world. And it was amazing to experience her. And she used to work for the Department of Education and Culture in Mexico City, and which was in El Zócalo in the center of Mexico. And maybe I was by then 6 years old, and I remember she didn't know what to do with me because I was out of my mind, and I was drawing in the walls and like everywhere. And one day she organized somebody to take us down to see the archaeological site, and it just blew my mind that there was a city underneath another city. And that kind of triggered the path that it started there. And I still remember like touching a wall, and back then you could get closer to the materials, and it just like triggered so much in me of thinking that there are kind of like another culture coming up. And then and through the years, my mom did a lot of documentaries and projects with indigenous groups. And another fascinating moment with them was understanding that there's a system of values, and then there's another system of values. So, for example, I learned very young how things that were more weird had more value, like masks that my mom would acquire had nothing to do with how big or how colorful they were. They were about if the masks were danced enough. And that was the value that some of the people that we met would give to the object. So to me, there was like, I was always in this world that had another world and another system, and that kind of like imprinted in my head, and I've never been able to get enough of it.
I didn't know that about the masks and how they value that. So, all right, continuing on this theme of history. What stories of the Latina community and Latin America do you feel are still untold?
this is like the most important, I think, issue for our culture is that curiosity. It's like I think that everybody has a story to tell.
Yeah.
Like I think that we're very good at telling stories, and there's a lot of like Mexicans and Latin Americans that are telling stories in a very good way. But I think that the trigger to me is the sense of curiosity to the other, and I do believe that there's a lot of work to be done between the Latinx communities of trying to understand each other, because I feel like there's a lot of differences between Colombians and Mexicans and Argentinians and Brazilians, and I believe that we should we should listen to each other's stories more profoundly, and that I've always said this, like instead of a Department of War, it should be a Department of Curiosity, because that would help us understand each other a little bit more, and I've never met a bigot that was curious. So that to me it's everybody, like you sit down in any place with a lot of Latinos, and I loved you, like everybody, every house, every person has this. I was in a beautiful table last night with a bunch of actors. We were a little rowdy, so I apologize. But
Look at what you started.
But the thing is that it's amazing how everyone, not only the actors, but everyone, you ask in this room, anyone, en la tía dijo, she was this, and the mother of the tía or the abuela did that. And I love that about our culture. We are a culture of storytellers. And let me tell you something, it started not 1,000 years ago, it started 30,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago. I've traveled all over the world to see cave art. And it's amazing how we started telling stories. You can feel people saying things with their hands, with their pigments, with their blood, that is still in walls. You feel it. They used to use light, like firelight, so it flickered. So they were the first filmmakers. And I love that we are connected to that tradition from thousands of years to now, and we're still telling stories. We're still a bunch of people that can sit down in front of a fire and tell our stories. And that, to me, is what I love about all of the different frequencies that I do, that they help me communicate stories and tell stories with different kind of forms and languages. And to us, if we can build some more bridges from that point of view, I think that's the answer for your question. I think that's what I would love to stay curious.
I love that. So you've heard it here. There will now be a Department of Curiosity that we're going to figure out how to found.
Yes.
And I agree with you, and I love that. All right, so on to more about your storytelling. So Leopoldo is a prolific writer. And how many books do you have now?
I don't know. It's embarrassing.
It's many.
But also in my head, because sometimes I think that I already wrote one and it's not.
Many books. And you have a couple of books coming out.
Yes.
Very soon. And one of them is, I feel, very appropriately, it's named Rooted y Raizado. We all know Rooted and Raizado. It's part of the theme of our festival is about being rooted. So tell us a little bit about Rooted and your other work that's coming out. First of all, what drove you to write these new works? How did you write two books at the same time? I don't understand that.
Well, no, it's not true. This is my novel that I wrote. And then this one, I wrote a story in this beautiful book called Lo que nos siguió a casa, Something Followed Us Home. It's in English and Spanish, and it's an anthology of Latinx horror. I hate that the label horror. It's very deceiving, and I think it doesn't express the beautiful, what Guillermo del Toro said, the beautiful horror. To me, it's Goya. It's the connection to our deepest dreams and our darkest demons, and it's how it's funny in Mexico. If you go to Dia de los Muertos, you feel that levity and that sense of play, even though it's sad. I mean, and we can talk another hours about Dia de los Muertos. We've had this conversation before. I feel like it's been misinterpreted a little bit because it's more of a ritual than a festival. And in Rooted, I had a 2-book proposition with these publishers, which are called Tor. They're wonderful publishers, part of Macmillan, and they're very focused on this kind of work, and I had to me, horror is not it's a path of connecting myself with stories that I found of our lore and our mythologies, and that comes from even before the Aztec Empire, of pre-Hispanic history, and I obsessively studied for years some of the most beautiful art, gods portrayed and sculpted that are in the Museo de Antropología. I used to go as a kid because my mom also worked around that, doing communications and campaigns, and I love to experience them, and it is so sophisticated, their creative output. Like in this particular book of Rooted, I found this god that in the first appearance seemingly feels terrifying, because it's a flayed god, but then when you go deeper into Aztec culture, you felt that it was not about being flayed, it was about regeneration. And I kind of twisted the idea of what if, my mom was also a little witchy, and I felt like, why is it that negative? Why can't it be positive? So why can't I talk about a witch that is kind of control, that is kind of keeping us alive and keeping that life force alive through her soul? And obviously, it's a metaphor of a lot of things that are happening in the world. And I, that this journey took me into. There's a huge movement in Mexico of bringing back some of the looted artifacts that have been. I think there's thousands of pieces of archaeology that are all over the world, and Mexico wants it back. And the story started with that. I heard of this, kind of lawyer of archaeology that was fighting in Europe, and I thought that's just a great character. What if that character is a Mexican woman? And I imagined my mom, and that's how I started to of the process that this book took me. And then the word rooted started because the natural things that happened in Mexico City has been having an incredible problem with water. Both, and it's very contradictory because on the one hand, Mexico is actually sinking because it was built on top of the Aztec Empire, and it was a lake. Right. And there was a incredible, like our Shakespeare in Mexico was Netzahualcoyotl, which was a great leader, poet, artist, an incredible. It was like kind of like our William Shakespeare, and he was working with the currents of the lake. And when the Spaniards invaded and they drained the lake, they never figured out how the organization or water flow was happening. And in Mexico, on the one hand there's a water problem, but on the other hand there's a drought problem. And I kind of like started to tap into those things through the power of the witches in my book. So that's how it started.
I'm so excited to read it. All right, so we are going to have copies here that will be signed by Leopoldo following this conversation. But tell people when your book is coming out, and where they can tell other people to find it.
The book is coming out on September 15, and there's like any bookstore, I love to support, independent bookstores, but you can get it online in whatever. But actually, the book that I'm signing here is the first of these two, which is called Piñata.
Yes, Piñata.
Because the book is not out, and the publisher just couldn't have copies for this event. But if you get Piñata, I'll make sure that you get Rooted. If you contact me and you came to this place and say I need a Rooted, I'll get you one.
Okay, you heard it here. Sorry, I got confused, but Piñata is here and to be signed.
Yeah, of course. But thank you. But I love everyone. So whatever. Some people don't have the money, so I'm happy to help. And the thing that I'm proud the most is that we are in a great moment of in the world, because our opportunities to amplify our stories is to translate them from one medium to the other. And I do believe that everybody should write a book and everybody should make a painting. So my path has just been a a showcase that you can do it. Because if a crazy dyslexic kid that has, I've had a big life. I lost everything through a fire twice. I've had so many different, disruptions in my experience, in my journey, and what we can do the best as Latinos is we're resilient, and we pick each other up, and we start all over, and we always persevere. So I really love this community because it's how it gives me a lot of strength and a lot of power, and I feel like I hope that I sprinkle a little bit that in those two books.
Thank you. And so, all right, so we have a lot of assignments we're leaving with. So, first of all, you're going to have a chance to chat with Leo a little bit about.
And the publisher is a new publisher. I mean, I couldn't remember all the names, but you can. I think we have some copies, and like paperwork and banks kind of like fullest is what